Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Once upon a time, there were 3 wizards. A blue wizard, a green wizard, and a grey wizard. Academically gifted, they excelled at magic school over many long years of study, where they had striven to become learned and lauded scholars. They were powerful and insightful, and widely tipped for greatness, each possessing deep theoretical knowledge of magic, both new and ancient, practical skills far exceeding those of their peers, and a desire to experiment and prove themselves with exciting and perilous emerging technologies. Each carried a deep, abiding, strongly held belief that their destiny was to achieve greatness and fantastic recognition for their brilliance. But life in the magic school turned slowly. Ideas they were required to work with were progressive and innovative, but they took a long time to yield results, and longer still to percolate up through the ivory tower of the magic school, at a pace that greatly frustrated our protagonists. How were they to achieve recognition in this way? The applications and impacts of their work were obfuscated and removed from their day-to-day lives. And so they went out, departing the magic school into the world, on a quest for fame and fortune, scouring the land for opportunities to use magic and to show opportunities to show their quality. I'm Alex, and I'm going to talk to you today not about wizards, or not entirely about wizards, but I'm going to talk to you about why a truly great data strategy isn't about data at all. So, I'm going to start with, what's a strategy? Well, let's put some words on the screen. It's a long-range plan of action intended to achieve a specific goal or outcome. There's a lot to unpack in that. And I think the parts we're going to focus on today are things like intended and plan, and goal and outcome. Because if you don't have those things, you don't have a strategy at all. How does that apply to data? Well, data usually sits in between IT and business, alongside functions like HR and finance and all those other good things that are happening there. And your strategy usually builds out things like data and methods and tech and value and people, etc. All of the dimensions that many of you in this room will have an awareness of. Some of you will have worked in the context of a data strategy. Some of you will have written one, and a couple of you may be thinking about writing one. So what makes a data strategy work? Let's go and talk about some wizards. After travelling north for several weeks, the blue wizard traverses an enormous swamp and arrives at a great castle of stone. Entering through the dilapidated gate, the blue wizard approaches the Prime Minister and requests an audience with the ruler of the kingdom. "I'm sorry," says the Prime Minister. "The king has no interest in magic or in wizards." Undeterred, the blue wizard spent many weeks petitioning to see the king, and at long last eventually receives an audience. "Greetings, sire," says the blue wizard. "Ah, a wizard! I'm so delighted to see you. I've never had a wizard in my court before. I've heard all about you in What King magazine, and I hear magic is really the thing to do." "If you're so pleased to receive me," says the wizard, "why did it take me so long to secure an audience with you?" The king looks uncomfortable. "Our kingdom is ancient. It's grown over many generations. Our bureaucracy is vast and labyrinthine. Making even simple decisions has become very difficult, and I need the help of a wizard." "What would you have me do, O king?" says the wizard. "I want you to make the bureaucracy better," said the king. "I want to make decisions faster, more efficiently. I'll make you my most trusted advisor. I'll meet you every day. I'll make sure you have everything you need." The wizard thinks for a moment and says, "Okay, I think I can help you." "Excellent," says the king. "Here's my plan." But all did not proceed to plan. Contrary to their words, the king did not make the wizard their most trusted advisor. They did not formally appoint them as an advisor of any kind, and they did not meet them every day. In fact, they didn't meet them at all. The wizard ended up buried in a cell at the bottom of the bureaucracy. The only news of the kingdom they ever received were the missives, the proclamations from the king. The communications that were so polished and so crafted that nobody could really understand what the king wanted at all, or what the kingdom actually needed. It transpired that the king's plan that they'd articulated to the Blue Wizard was insufficiently detailed for the wizard to get the right parts of the bureaucracy transformed. And they wasted lots of time and resources. They spent weeks using magic to automate the treasury, to count the coffers of the kingdom much faster. But nobody cared and used that information because all the people really needed was a decision about how to build a new school. They invested months in helping the census department collect new information about the people of the kingdom. But the people of the kingdom didn't trust how that information was going to be used, and so nobody filled in the census. And after all that time, the bureaucracy was busy making more and more layers of advisors, administrations and processes, and the king and the people became more and more frustrated. The Green Wizard fared no better. They wound up at a small town surrounded by golden crops that were starting to wither in the heat. They requested an audience with the king, and the king said, "My kingdom is young and successful, but my people are struggling. We used the best technology available to us at the founding of our town to grow rapidly, but we didn't invest in documenting our work or upgrading our technology. And now the web of machines is so arcane that it exhausts my people to use and maintain it. There's no time to grow crops, there's no time to travel the road, to trade with distant lands and learn new skills. I'm worried that soon my kingdom will wither and die, and my people will leave me for another king. I have for many years promised them change, and I've employed a series of conjurers and hedge wizards in an attempt to do so. But now that you, a great wizard, are here, I can make that promise real." "Okay," says the Green Wizard. "I think I can help you." "Excellent," replies the king. "Here's my plan." The Green Wizard fared little better than the Blue, for once elaborated upon, the king's plan introduced problems of its own. "I've been very clever and have had a great idea," said the king. "Oh dear," thought the Green Wizard, for while the king was indeed clever and had led the kingdom to great success, they were not wise in the ways of science and magic. "I want you to introduce magic to every process in the kingdom. I want everything to be faster, easier, smarter, more reliable and more secure. Everything that's already happening must be automated and continue happening at much lower cost, and my people can learn new skills and go abroad to grow my kingdom further. In fact, I read in What King magazine that all the best magic uses snake oil, Python to be exact. So we're going to use Python in every process from now on." The Green Wizard had of course used plenty of Python in their time, but knew it wasn't an easy ingredient to master. "We don't have any Pythons in the kingdom, my lord, and what's more, the townsfolk don't know how to use Python." "Well, I promised everyone that you would teach them how to use it. And if you don't do it successfully, I can always find another wizard." And so, at great expense to the kingdom, the Green Wizard began the import and distribution of Python, and did their best to train the people of the kingdom in its use and in their recipes and processes. The initial results were very promising. The basic processing of financial records and import-export forms was accelerated tenfold. But once most of the easily automated processes had been tackled, the more complex parts of the town's undocumented machinery confounded understanding and could not be translated easily into the idiosyncrasies of Python use. Worse, the culture of mass magic use and little to no documentation led to mass confusion at which version of which recipes and processes should be used when. And even worse, the townsfolk began to use Python in inappropriate ways, culminating in an entire host of workers being transformed into snakes, following an ill-advised preparation of tea. What was the Green Wizard to do? And lastly, the Grey Wizard. Having travelled far and having had many adventures of a most unpleasant sort, arrives at a mountain stronghold. The king gives them refreshment and says, "I have summoned you here for great purpose. You are to create for me a magic mirror that foretells the future." "Very good, sire," says the Grey Wizard with a wry inward smile, for they have seen this question asked many times before, and it's never quite worked out. The king, sensing the wizard's cynicism, persists. "Just recently, I was at a gathering of kings, and the other kings said they all have powerful magic that shows them the future. I don't like looking less impressive in front of the other kings," they added petulantly. "Such magic is very difficult to work," replied the wizard. "It takes a great deal of planning and many resources. I shall need lots of unicorns." "You shall have everything you need," said the king. "People, technology, ingredients. I'll spare no expense." "Okay," said the Grey Wizard. "I think I can help you." "Excellent," replied the king. "Here's my plan." And of course, the Grey Wizard tried valiantly to create the magic mirror. The king stayed true to their word, providing enormous investment, including a team of hand-picked unicorn scientists to assist the Grey Wizard. The king visited the wizard's workshop every day, scrutinising the scientists and their work and passing vocal judgment on their progress. If they thought insufficient progress had been made, the king would criticise their choices and openly denigrate them for their efforts. But the scientists were experimenting with magic for the first time and made many mistakes. They became cautious and reluctant to explore opportunities to accelerate the project. They would not show one another their work, and certainly would not show the king until the mirror worked perfectly. As the weeks and months ticked by, the king became increasingly frustrated at the slow delivery of the mirror and put pressure on the Grey Wizard to show them some progress. Eventually, a prototype was completed, but it was very late and very over budget. And upon being tested, it failed to show the king a future that pleased them. "This shows my kingdom falling," he said. "How dare you bring this before me?" And then he promptly sent the unicorns to the dungeon. "You must begin again," ordered the king, "and if it fails again, I'll send you to the dungeon too." The Grey Wizard looked worried. Okay, I'm done talking about wizards again for a while. It's an allegory that I hope is really, really obvious to everybody in the room by now, what I'm talking about and why. I've met many, many organisations who say they have a data strategy, who've spent weeks, months, years of effort preparing that data strategy, but when put into practice, those organisations have struggled to achieve success. When they operationalise, they quickly discover a slew of challenges that impede progress. The technology doesn't work, people don't understand it, they haven't got the meta, the data quality is incredibly poor, they've got the wrong tooling for the skills they have in the organisation, and no one's thought about the intangibles like ideas, networks, people. Promised dates, if there even are any, begin to slip. There's no consequence and ability and forethought about course correction. Nobody thinks about changing scope because nobody wants to sacrifice their ambitions, especially if promises have been made and communicated. It rapidly becomes apparent that the thing as a whole was too ambitious, discovery had not discovered very effectively, and the actual change or investment required massively exceeds any budgeting or estimation that could have been done. The organisation balks, confidence is lost, and withdraws support. It starts imposing unrealistic deadlines, and eventually the data strategy collapses. I've unfortunately seen this many times over. So, what's missing? These data strategies are written by smart, well-informed people, maybe like us. They usually have a really good handle on the current state of the organisation. Oftentimes that current state's been validated by the leadership, or IT or their leaders. They set a reasonable target state. The technology is good enough for the problem as it's been articulated. The inflection points have been identified, so we know when to change. The tooling marries the current and anticipated future needs adequately, and the governance structure is aligned with best practice and maps accurately to the organisation. And overall, they recognise the constraints and objectives, time, money, insofar as they have been articulated. But when you scratch the surface, there's very little detail in these data strategies. When you ask questions like, what's your definition of success? How will you measure success? Are you even measuring the value of data? And the data strategies are isolated. They come off as generic and sterile, even if they've been highly customized for the organization. Oftentimes they focus on the data, and they focus on data-adjacent areas. But there's limited consideration of impact, coordination, and integration across the organization, and almost no consideration of the complexities of tackling and affecting change. Oopsie-daisy. And finally, there's almost no consideration of uncertainty, what to do when things go wrong. There's insufficient attention to defence. So what makes a strategy great? What makes a strategy good? How do you start to address these shortcomings? It's very simple. Two things: motivation and culture. This is what elevates a strategy from being merely existing to being great. And if you get them right, it will make your strategy truly great. It is vital to understand and communicate the motivations of the organisation and of the people leading that organisation, because that's what makes up the direction. If the organisation is directionally aligned, everything's good. Everybody pulls in the same direction. But if they're not clear and they're not baked into everybody's distinct strategies, everybody will pull in different directions. The intent, going back to our definition of strategy, becomes unclear. The plan of action becomes muddled and misaligned. Everybody has a plan. Data has a plan, HR has a plan, finance has a plan. But if you're all pulling in separate directions, there's going to be friendly fire all over the place. No guarantee, therefore, that any of those plans are actually actionable. So, I would say action number one for you: identify direction as soon as possible. My second point for you is about culture. Very few, if any, organisations design a data strategy to maintain their excellent position on data. We're already fantastic. We've already got it covered. Everything's perfect. We don't want to change anything. Most data strategies are change strategies. Everybody wants to move from low maturity to high maturity. The challenge with change is that it devalues social capital, potentially, within an organisation. There's a focus on formal structures, and it devalues networks and informal structures, which I think explains a lot of the sterility and therefore the resistance that you get when you try and put your data strategy into operation. A lot of data strategies are written by people early in their tenure in an organisation. You land as a head of data, you land as a CDO, you land as a senior data leader of any kind within an organisation. You're challenged with, in 3 months, bring me a data strategy. In 6 months, bring me a data strategy. You might have a really clear vision of what utopia looks like, using all the different technologies and ideas and concepts that are outside this room right now. But how can you possibly understand the transition required for the existing culture in the organisation? All those different relationships that are going to break, that are going to change. All the different ways of working that you're going to introduce. People are going to be worried about what happens to their day-to-day lives. And what utopia looks like from their perspective might be totally different from what you've got in your head, especially if you're very confident with using tools. So, successful change, successful data strategy, recognises and maintains and builds that social capital. It compensates for any change fatigue by building stable elements that persist across different parts of your strategy over time, building layers. So my second piece of advice, create cross-functional and cross-role links as soon as possible, aka build your own social capital in this organisation as soon as you can, as fast as you can, and as meaningfully as you can. I think if you do both of those things in your strategy, you'll find that the milestones that you jointly create with people through your combined social capital are not only meaningful within the context of the wider organisational strategy, because you've got the motivations, but they're also become fundamental to overall success, because you design them in partnership with your network. Success becomes essential to the wider organisation, and it ensures that the data capability doesn't become the sole driver of change. You're a linchpin, but not everything can go through you. So, when you leave here today, I want you to think about two questions. Everybody in this room, I assume, is interested in data and is in some capacity a data leader. Maybe you're in an SLT, maybe you're a head of data, maybe you're head of your team, maybe you're head of yourself. Ask yourself, can I state the motivations of my organisation? Can I write them down on a cigarette packet or a post-it note? Can I state how my data strategy builds social capital? Ask yourself those two questions. Ask your data leader, ask your SLT, your senior leadership team. If anybody doesn't give you a convincing answer on those questions, it's time to start puzzling those things out together. Yellow light, let's think again about what our data strategy looks like. So, let's revisit where we got to with our wizards. I have a few more minutes of you captive. Revisiting the Blue Wizard, fortunately, they were an enterprising sort. They worked hard to inveigle their way into relationships within the kingdom. They met with the king's advisors frequently. Over a hot brew, they would discuss the business of the day, the problems affecting the kingdom, the king's state of mind and how to influence them. Who was ambitious, who was not. Who was talented, who was not. Who was skillful, and who was not. Day by day, conversation by conversation, the Blue Wizard realised their own detailed understanding of the ambitions and expectations of the kingdom. They realised the king and their advisors were never going to be able to articulate specifically what about the bureaucracy they wanted to be better. Not by how much, not by when, or what decisions needed to be made. At least in a way that the wizard was able to use magic fully. They also realised they didn't need to know all that in granular detail. Leveraging the friendships they'd made along the way, the relationships and networks they'd created, and their understanding of the overall direction of the kingdom, they managed to turn things around. By regularly building and sending out little pieces of what everybody wanted, sprinkled with just enough magic to make it interesting, they slowly built towards an efficient bureaucracy, fully automated with magic. They never did have day-to-day meetings with the king. They were never appointed to the rank of most trusted advisor, but they did make things better, a little bit at a time. The Green Wizard had their work cut out for them, particularly once the pythons escaped and infested the farmhouse outside the town. They requested and received an urgent audience with the king. "To be honest, King," said the wizard, "in our zealous pursuit of using magic to automate everything and achieve success, I think we focus too much on using magic, to the extent of neglecting improvements to our culture. And we focus too much on Python, when other ingredients would have been far more appropriate." The king, sitting on their throne made of pythons, with a python draped across them, said, "I agree. What should we do?" So the Green Wizard and the king together undid the errant magic plaguing the town, rounded up the escaped snakes, and restored the transformed townsfolk to their regular shapes. The processes and machinery went back to non-magical means of operation, but benefiting from improved governance. Magic use became much more tightly controlled, with much more effort being spent on training people how to be effective with just a little magic, how to be responsible, and how to communicate it effectively. Eventually, they reintroduced Python magic to many people, but not all of the processes necessary for the running of the kingdom. Only where it can make a big difference, and only where it makes sense to do so. The Grey King very long in the tooth following their own adventures, spoke immediately with the Mountain King. "My lord, the magic mirror you requested is indeed feasible with the resources you so generously provide. But we cannot succeed unless we change the culture of your kingdom. Everyone here is so afraid of failure. They will not take risks, even ones where the opportunity is very great and the likelihood of failure is very small, for fear of being sent to the dungeon. I have seen many such kingdoms many times before, and they have all ended in failure. That may be why your magic mirror shows a future where your kingdom falls." The king looked shocked, horrified even. "But I just wanted my magic mirror." "I know," said the Grey Wizard, "but even the best people need to operate in an environment of psychological safety in order to thrive. You are the only one who can change the culture of your kingdom and enable the successful creation of the magic mirror you so covet." The king, convinced by the Grey Wizard, learned from their mistakes and changed their ways forthwith. The magic mirror went through several more stages of development before it was successfully completed, with many failures along the way, and nobody else was sent to the dungeons. Before you came to the presentation today, I made you a promise. That promise was to tell you and inform you why a truly great data strategy isn't about data at all. So if it's not about data, what's it about? It's about motivations and culture. And if you're lacking confidence or clarity on the motivations for your data strategy and its impact on social capital, and if you're interested in unbiased and objective perspectives, not necessarily involving wizards, come and see me at stand 317. Thank you very much.